they wear, what they say, how they act in public. Imagine being 13 or 14 years old, still trying to figure out who you are, while barely having any control over your own life. From the outside, everything looks perfect. The company makes money, the kid becomes famous, everyone seems happy, at least for a while. But here is the pattern I noticed over and over again with almost every single Disney star. First, you are young and you have to appear wholesome. Every part of your image is controlled by someone else. Then your parts of your image is controlled by someone else. Then your contract ends. And overnight, you are suddenly free. Except nobody over prepared you for that freedom. And then comes the third part. You either push back hard against the image that was built for you, or you simply fall apart. Take Disney, take Lindsay Lohan. Most people do not immediately connect her to Disney, but her two biggest early roles were both Disney films. She also signed a record deal, even though singing was never really her strength. Because when you are a Disney star, that details does not matter much. Her struggles at home were already difficult before any of this even started. She had to learn how to smile for cameras while dealing with serious family issues behind the scenes. And once Disney was finished with her, she went from being one of the most closely supervised young women in the industry to being almost entirely on her own, a teenager with unlimited money, unlimited access, and a level of fame most ground adults could not handle. What comes next is well known: the legal trouble, the public struggles. The system was simply never built to prepare her for life after the cameras turned away. And without stability at home either, she really never had much for a chance. Demi Lovato is one of the most talented singers to come out of the Disney system. She likely would have succeeded in music either way, but her Disney shows turned her into a major star very quickly, and she has spoken publicly about how confusing it was to watch her own image become a product. Something sold, something marketed, something she had very little control over. Disney owned a record label exists specifically to take young stars who are already famous for television and push them into music, even if singing was never their original path. What makes Demi Stars especially heartbreaking is that her struggle did not wait until after Disney ended. They started while she was still working there, while she was still smiling for cameras. She has openly discussed serious struggles with body image and substance use that began at very young age, all while still being expected to represent perfection publicly, being told to always be the good example, always hit your marks, never complain, never show a crack. That kind of pressure does not make difficult emotions disappear. It just delays them. And once the structure that was holding everything together fall apart, the struggle becomes even harder to manage. Miley Cyrus lived something almost identical to her own television character. Her shows was literally about living a double life. A normal kid by a day, a famous star by night, and in real life, she has said the role left her struggling to separate herself from the character entirely, asking a developer teenager to live two identities at once. While one of these identities is legally owned by a corporation, that does something to young mind. When her contract ended, she very publicly and aggressively broke away from that wholesome image, almost as if she needed the break to be loud enough that nobody could confuse it two versions of her again. What followed was years of searching, trying on different entities, different sounds, different looks. It eventually looked close to a decade for her to fully move past that constructed image and build something that actually felt like her own. Selena Gomez took a very difficult path than the others. She did not have public legal trouble like some others did. She did not have a dramatic public breakdown either. Instead, she held everything inside, which in some ways can be even more difficult to carry. She went through the same system, the same record label, the same enormous pressure to appear constantly happily and perfect, but instead of that pressure showing up as outward cause, it showed up as anxiety, depression, and ultimately serious physical health struggles as well. Including a major health diagnosis and transplant, she has never directly blamed Disney for any of this. But if you listen closely to her own words over the years, the pattern becomes very clear. She has described feeling like a product, spending years trying to say the right things simply to protect her own peace of mind. Her story proves something important. The damage from this kind of childhood fame does not always look the same from the outside. Sometimes it is loud, sometimes it is completely silent, but it often comes from the exact same root. And those are from the one example. Britney Spears got her very start on Disney show as a child. Other former Disney and children television stars have spoken publicly over the years about serious struggles, addiction, eating disorders, grief, legal trouble, the pressure to always appear perfect while quietly falling apart behind the scenes. It is genuinely difficult, especially for those of us who grew up watching these shows, to learn just how much pain was happening behind some of our favorite childhood memories. But there is some good news here too. As more of these stories have come to light in recent years, real changes have started happening. Laws have been updated to better protect young performers and even young content creators online. Some former child stars have gone on actively pushed for mental sport to become required part of working with children in the industry. Some are now working directly on sets, helping make sure the next generation does not have to go through what they did. The system is far from perfect, but for the first time in a long time, it finally seems to be moving the right direction. Let me tell you something about being the greatest. It comes with a curse. No matter how high you claim, you always feel like you have to prove it again. Nobody carried that weight more than Michael Jackson. He was not just a perfectionist by accident, he demanded it of himself. Every album had to top the last one. Every tour had to be bigger than before. Not because anyone forced him, because that is who he was deep down. And that same drive that made him the greatest entertainer who ever lived, it also what made him an easy target. By 2008, Michael Jackson had not toured in over 10 years. He was 50 years old, his public image was struggling, and he was carrying over $400 million in debt. He needed one more show, one more chance to prove to the world and to himself that he was still him. And there were people around him who understood exactly how badly he needed that. Even as a teenager, Michael had an obsession with greatness. He practiced consistently, he danced even when there was no show that day. He pushed through pain. He kept dancing once when his hair caught fire on set. He even pushed himself to the point of the passing out during rehearsal once. That need to be the best was not something he chose. It was simply who he was. And that same mistake made him incredibly valuable. In 2008, a major entertainment company approached Michael with an offer. They owned arenas. They produced tours. They saw an opportunity that nobody else was willing to bet at the time. A real comeback. The deal with massive 50 shows, a residency in London. Together, Michael and the company stood to earn hundreds of millions of dollars. Once you added ticket sales, merchandise, sponsorship, and media rights, estimate came past $1 billion. But here is the problem. Michael was already deep in debt, and the company had already advanced him tens of millions of dollars before a single show happened. This was not something Michael could simply walk away from. Things went wrong. The money was already spent. The contracts was already signed. The company needed this tour to happen, and so did Michael. And so did Michael. Not just for the money, he needed the world to see him one more time. Everything was riding on this, for everyone involved. But almost immediately, things started falling apart. On the day, Michael was supposed to announce the tour to the world. The promoter on team wrote internally that Michael was locked in his room, struggling. He showed up over an hour late. The public was told it was simply traffic. Michael walked out on the stage, told the world this was it. And to everyone watching, it looked like he was back. But behind the scenes, the people running the show already knew something was wrong, and they pushed forward anyway. Over the following months, concerns grew among the internal teams about Michael's health. At the one point, internal messages even suggesting pulling the plug entirely. But instead, they brought in a doctor, someone Michael already trusted. This doctor had treated Michael off and on for the few years. By 2009, he was deeply in debt himself, facing the loss of his own home, behind on payments to multiple people, and then came to offer a contract promising him over $100,000 a month to serve Michael's personal physician. That kind of money changes everything. When you are drawing in debt, the contract was never technically signed, but he was already treating Michael while waiting on that payday. Think about what that means. The one person responsible for the keeping Michael healthy had every financial reason in the world to keep him performing, no matter what. If the tour stopped, he stopped getting paid too. So now you have three parties, all locked into the same outcome. Michael, who needed to prove he was still the greatest. The company, who needed to recover their massive investment. And the doctor, who needed Michael to keep going so he could finally get paid. Every single person around Michael had a financial reason to keep him moving forward. In the documentary footage from this time, Michael looks incredible, dancing, directing the band, obsessing over every detail like he always did. But what the cameras did not show was that happened in between. Michael was losing weight, missing rehearsals. One sound engineer provided wrote that Michael was not physically ready to sing and dance at the same level yet. That message was sent just 1 month before opening night. People around him were starting to notice, but nobody wanted to be the one to stop the whole thing. Michael's long-time hair and makeup artist, someone who worked closely with him for every 20 years, began noticing something seriously wrong. She wrote to one of his managers saying she had personally watched him physically over the course of just 1 month. Friends who saw Michael in person during this time sent her message too. One person wrote that when they hugged him, there was almost nothing there. Another wrote something even more alarming, describing seeing him without his jacket on and saying if nothing changed, he would die. She became genuinely afraid for him. She warned his manager directly, telling that Michael Bones was visibly protruding and that body wanted him collapsing in front of thousands of people. But Michael was stubborn, nobody close to him, and convinced him to walk away from what he saw as one of the most important moments of life. The one people who truly had the power to stop this were the man running the company behind the tour, and 3 weeks before opening night, the show production manager sent an urgent message saying Michael had been sent home from rehearsal that day, calling him a basket case and saying the director feared he might embarrass himself on stage or worse get hurt. The director had worked with Michael before. He knew him. He knew what Michael looked like when something was seriously wrong. The very next day, the director sent an even more urgent message describing Michael as weak. Rambling, he recommended Michael undergo a psychological evaluation before continuing. The response he got back was dismissive. The company executive told him that nobody around this show should try to play amateur doctor and praised the new physician instead, calling him ethical, unbiased, someone who did not even needed the job financially. You almost have to shake your head at that line, considering what we now know about that doctor's financial situation at the time. Behind closed doors, that same executive privately told his own boss that the director growing concern was starting to worry him, not Michael health. The director concerned, so a meeting was called at Michael's house. The director, the doctor, company executives, and Michael himself. According to police records from later investigation, when the director confronted the room about his concern, the doctor told him bluntly to get out. The one person sounding the alarm was silenced by one person with the most financial incentive to keep things moving forward. Behind the scenes, for weeks leading up to this, the doctor had been giving Michael small dose of a powerful surgical anesthetic just to help him sleep. And on the morning of June 25, 2009, after Michael still could not sleep through the night, the doctor gave him a stronger dose. Michael finally fell asleep. He never woke up. This happened just 5 days after that tense meeting. 5 days after multiple warnings were raised and dismissed. The doctor was later arrested and charged in connection with Michael's death. At trial, prosecutor argued he had acted recklessly by using powerful surgical drug to treat ordinary sleeplessness. The jury agreed. He was convicted and sentenced to several years in prison. But the bigger question was never really about just one doctor. It was about everyone who put him in that position in the first place. The following year, Michael's mother filed a lawsuit on behalf of herself and Michael's children. The following years, Michael's mother filed a lawsuit on behalf of herself and Michael's children against the company behind the tour. The lawsuit argued that company prioritized profit over Michael's health and safety. They sought $1.5 billion in damage. The trial lasted 5 months. Dozens of witnesses testified. Hundreds of pages of internal documents were reviewed. In the end, the jury ruled that while the company had indeed hired the doctor himself was not considered unfit for the role at the time he was hired, which means, under the law, the company was not held responsible for what happened. The family walked away with nothing. One of the most painful details to come out during the trial come from a message sent just 1 week after Michael's death. An executive wrote that while it was tragedy, life had to go on, and that the company stood to make significant money from merchandise, ticket retention, a touring exhibition, and a documentary film. And they did. The company profited from all of it, included a documentary built entirely from rehearsal footage of a man they had already watched struggling for weeks. So in the end, Michael was gone. The doctor served a short sentence, and the company walked away financially protected. But here's the one thing that no company, no lawsuit, no email chain can overtake away. Michael's actual legacy does not belong to any of them. It belongs to the people who loved his music. To every person who has ever tried to learn the moonwalk, to every artist who looks up to what he built, the emails do not define him. The trial does not define him. we do. Let me tell you about something strange happening in the music world right now. Once you understand the real reason behind it, you will never look at it the same way again. A lot of famous rappers spent years publicly criticizing Donald Trump. They built entire careers being against the establishment, against the system, against the everyone he stood for. And now, suddenly, many of those same artists are standing right beside him, smiling for the cameras, calling him a friend. So what really changed? The answer goes back almost 40 years, long before politics even entered the picture. Back in 1987, Trump wrote a book about how he does the business. He explained his number one rule for getting what he wants from people. He said the most powerful thing you can have in any relationship is leverage. That means finding something the other person wants, or even better, something they truly need, and using that to build loyalty. That single idea explained almost everything that has happened between Trump and the music industry for decades. Let us go back to where this all started. In the 1980s and the 90s, Trump owned several casinos in Atlantic City. Back then, that city was considered the East Coast version of Las Vegas. And live entertainment was a huge part of his business. Big name performers played at the same parties regularly. One of the most important bridges between Trump and the music world was respected music executive, one of the founding voices behind a major hip-hop record label for over 30 years. This man was one of Trump's closest friends, flying on his plane, attending family events, building real personal trust between Trump and the music industry. That friendship opened doors. It got Trump featured on songs. It got him appearance on popular television shows. It made him part of hip-hop culture long before most people realized it. Trump also built a real relationship with Michael Jackson. The two met in the late 80s and stayed close for years, flying together, attending events together. Michael even stayed Trump building for a period of time while working on album. Trump also spent years closely connected to CNCOM, often known as Diddy, attending his parties and events throughout the late 90s and early 2000s. By the time Trump decided to run for president, he had spent nearly 3 decades building these relationships. He was seen as a landlord, a party host, a symbol of wealth that everybody in the world respected. But the moment he announced his run for president, almost everything changed. Many of those same friendships ended overnight. Artists who once name dropped him proudly in their song started publicly distancing themselves. Some even sent him forward requests demanding to he stop playing their music at events. So Trump needed a new strategy. And true to what he wrote decades earlier, he stopped trying to make friends. He started building leverage instead. Right before leaving office after his first term, Trump issued a wave of presidential pardons and sentence reductions. Several of the names on that list happened to be well-known rappers facing serious legal trouble. One rapper had been facing up to 10 years in prison on weapons charges. He received a full pardon and publicly supported Trump ever since. Another rapper was serving several years for falsifying paperwork related to firearms. His sentence was reduced and he was released immediately. Since then, he has shown consistent public loyalty, even appearing at Trump political events. A well-known music industry executive connected to a major hip-hop label was pardoned for a drug-related conviction. Another well-known rapper recently received a pardon on gun charge as well. And then there is a case that really connects all the dots. One of the original co-founder of legendary hip-hop record label received help of getting released from prison and was later granted a full pardon. This man has deep respect and long-standing relationship throughout the music industry. Around that same time, one extremely famous rapper who had once threatened to publicly humiliate any artist who performed for Trump completely changed his tone. Within a few years, he was telling reporters he had nothing but respect for Trump. He went on to perform at one Trump official inauguration events. When asked about the backlash he received for the decision, his answer was simple. Trump had never done anything wrong to him personally and had actually done good things for him. That is leverage in action. Now, pardons are the only tool being used here. Some artists simply needed money. One major label publicly confirmed that Trump team offered him $3 million to perform at a political rally. He turned it down, but the offer itself tells you what doing it looks like for a major celebrity endorsement. Other artists have claimed similar large favors for performing at official events. For comparison, performers at a previous president inauguration were reportedly not paid at all for their appearances. This is not how behavior either. Records confirmed that years earlier, during his very first campaign announcement, Trump team paid every day people $50 each just to show up, hold signs, And cheers for the canvas. There is also financial piece to all this that often gets overlooked. Major recording artists typically earn well over $500,000 a year. Trump's tax policy lowered the top tax rate and added extra benefits for business owners, which includes many musicians who paid through their own companies. For someone earning million a year, that adds up to serious long-term savings. So when a major female rapper recently pledged hundreds of thousands of dollars to her Trump bandit saving program, she was not just making political statement, she was also positioning herself for meaningful financial return, along with a tax write-off on the donation itself. When you step back and look at the full picture, every single one of these relationships follows the exact same formula Trump wrote about decades ago. What does the artist usually want? Freedom from legal trouble, money, relevance, and continued